Hey folks, today we're going to go over the Bixpy DIY kit. This is going to be a comprehensive guide to how you can use the kit to modify your paddlecraft. So today we're going to be using this kit to modify our Viking kayak rudder. We're going to end up using this template that comes in the kit right here, and we're going to end up reshaping our rudder to accommodate the mount, which is also in this kit. Right here is the mount that will be used, and when we're done with our rudder, we'll be able to attach this mount to the rudder, and consequently we'll be able to attach the Bixpy to it. So this is a pretty cool setup, and I'm really excited about it, and we're gonna have to see what this thing can do. First, we're gonna need to cut out this template, and we're gonna have to go get our rudder. Our rudder is currently attached to the kayak, so we're gonna have to remove the rudder first in order to get started with this build. Okay, so now we removed our rudder from our kayak, and now what we need to do is we need to cut out the template, and we're gonna do that now. Okay, so it's now time to apply the template. And here I have the template taped onto the rudder. And if you look at the other portion of the template, it has this little line here, and it says rudder okay above here and no rudder below here. So we need to make note of that line when we're cutting the rudder. And now we're going to be going to mark out our rudder shape. Okay, so right now we're going to be taking the Bixpy standard attachment and we're going to be attaching it to the rudder. In order to do that, we are going to end up removing the fasteners from the Bixpy attachment, and then we will put the fasteners in once we have it in place on the rudder. So we will need a 2.5 millimeter hex or Allen wrench. That's what they look like there. I also have one that looks like this with a T-handle, which is very useful. So let's get started here. We're just going to end up removing those 4 bolts with the 2.5 hex. Okay, so now we removed all of our fasteners from the mount, and what we have to do is we have to slide the mount onto the rudder, and it will hopefully line up with the holes that we just drilled, and there it does. It lines up perfect. Now all we have to do is replace the fasteners and put them back in. So let's grab the bolts and the nuts, and we'll put them through the 4 holes and tighten it up. So if you have a different brand kayak, this step might be a little different. But with Viking kayaks, we need to remove this bungee, and then we're going to be installing a Viking uphaul kit. So as I mentioned earlier, with the Viking kayaks, it's going to be a little bit different because you have this option of installing the uphaul bracket. Now I removed that bungee, and that bungee has a hole in the rudder that lines up perfect with where the Viking uphaul kit can go. So this bracket here, we're going to end up bolting on to the existing hole where the bungee used to be. And what this Viking uphaul bracket does is it helps keep the motor in the water, and it at the same time allows the motor to swing out of the way should you hit anything, and it will have a line attached to it that runs up to the seat, and when I want to pull the motor out of the water, all I have to do is pull on that line and it will allow me to pull the rudder up out of the water. So it's a pretty cool feature. It's offered by Viking, but if you have another kayak, this part of the build might be a little bit different. Just stay tuned. So now the next part of the uphaul bracket installation for the Viking is to install this bungee, and we need to drill 2 holes there so that way we can wrap this bungee around the rudder and around that notch in the bracket. And so I am going to take out my white marker. I'm going to take the bungee here, I'm going to wrap it around the rudder kind of in that area, and I'm going to get an approximate area for me to drill 2 holes. Basically just kind of lining it up there, and that looks about right. So I'm going to mark out 2 little dots for me to drill 1/4 inch holes, and then that will allow us to pass this bungee around the rudder and around that uphaul bracket. Now what this is going to do is it's going to prevent too much free motion movement of that bracket, because when you have the torque of the motor going and you're in forward and reverse, it can move that rudder and it could move that bracket. So the bungee just adds a little bit of tension to that bracket and keeps it from moving too much. Okay, so now we have our pad eye that came with the uphaul bracket, and the uphaul is going to have line that comes out of there and goes through this pad eye and to the seat, and that's going to allow us to pull the motor out of the water. Now we got to turn this pad eye based on the direction that we want to run the line. If we want to run it that way, we have it turned this way. If we want to run it the other way, we turn it this way. I think I'm going to probably run it this way. Okay, so right now we have the kayak pretty much rigged up, and ready to go. I did decide to swap out the factory line that they provided me with some of my own, just because I wanted to have it match the kayak, and I had some of this paracord. So I ended up installing the line, and that's running from the uphaul. It runs under the pad eye. It runs right here to one of these connectors that they provided, then to another one of the connectors, and then I ended up putting the cleat there that they provided. And then they have this little ball piece, and you simply knot off the end so that the ball can't slip off, and that keeps it from sliding through the cleat. Now what does that do? When you end up pulling on this line, it will pull this into the up position. Now if you want to lock it into place in the up position, you can put it into that little notch I noticed. So that's kind of handy as well. But when you have the weight of the motor on here, which we're going to add here shortly, basically the gravity and the weight of the motor will allow you to drop the rudder down into the lower position. What's also the purpose of the uphaul? Well, if you were to hit something, you have the bungee, and the bungee can allow it to come up, but just the turbulence and the power and the thrust of the motor won't push the rudder up out of position. So that's kind of the other purpose of the uphaul. Okay, so now we're going to attach Bixpy to the motor mount on the rudder. To do that, we need to make sure that both the caps are off of the power supply and the motor itself. Then you align the connector pins, and when you're pushing that power supply cable onto the motor, you'll feel it all of a sudden kind of pop into place, and then you do a 180-degree turn with that little collar there, and you'll kind of feel a slight click, and then you can push the motor up kind of against the mount, and then you're gonna pull the little blue nose latch right there. So right here we're gonna pull down on that little latch, and then it'll allow us to press the motor up against the mount, and it's nice and seated. Then we can take the rear spring latch and we can attach that. And I like to put a little bit of tension there with my thumb, and then pop the latch down, and now the motor is attached to the rudder firmly. Okay, so here is a look at one of my favorite aspects of the Bixpy, and that is the battery. The battery is very cool. It has an auxiliary port, which is an output for 12 volt, and then it also has your input charging and your output for your motor. So it has 3 different plug areas. It has basically 2 outputs and 1 input for power. So this one right here is your charging, and we're going to make sure that's tight. We're going to make sure our auxiliary port is tight because we're not using those. And then we're going to undo the collar cap for our output to our motor. And then we can actually plug in our power supply for our motor. Just simply use those instructions there. So this right here is the key to Bixpy. It is a magnetic lanyard. It is essentially a kill switch. So if you fall overboard, the lanyard will pull off the battery and it will kill the motor so that your kayak doesn't run away from you. But when you attach the lanyard, it also turns the battery on there, as you can see, and it shows your battery level gauge. So just a pretty cool system. The battery, like I said, is one of my favorite things about Bixpy. Here is the remote, which is the other favorite aspect of Bixpy. You got some forward, reverse, and stop buttons. You got 10 forward speeds. episodes.